So our next up we have a PRIA GIS Workgroup. Integration is more important than ever. So we have Cindy Wisinski. She's been with the Portage County Register of Deeds Land Description Office since September 1986. In 1996, she was elected as Register of Deeds and has served in that position since. She's a current member of the Wisconsin Register of Deeds Association, Wisconsin Real Property Listers Association, Wisconsin County Constitutional Officers Association, and the WLIA, just to mention a few, while serving on several committees within the WCA, Portage County Land Records Committee, DOR SLF Committee, and the Wisconsin Land Information Council. Then we also have David Rooney. He began his career in local government in 1985 with the Miami-Dade County Property Appraiser. He played key roles in the official records interface with the appraiser's office, the property search web application, and the GIS property records for Miami-Dade County. David moved on to the Orlando area at the end of 2013 to manage the official records for the Orange County, Florida Comptroller, where they record around 700,000 documents a year. David became the Assistant Comptroller for Records Administration in 2017. And last but not least, we have Brent Jones, who's been with Esri for over 15 years and currently oversees Esri's worldwide strategic planning, business development, and marketing activities for land records, cadastral, surveying, and land administration. As a recognized innovator, Jones specializes in modernizing existing land administration systems and designing new GIS-based cadastral management systems for small and large governments globally. He is a licensed professional land surveyor and engineer, past board member, and president-elect of URISA, recipient of the 2019 ERecording Leadership Award, past president of GITA, Geospatial Information and Technology Association, and a current member of the UNGGIM LAS United Nations Committee of Experts on Geospatial Information Management, sitting on the expert group on land administration and management. And if you guys want to go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Sandy. I appreciate the opportunity for us to talk about PRIA and the GIS and Land Records initiative that we have. I'm going to kick it off with just giving a brief background of what PRIA is. Next slide, Brandon. PRIA started, it's been almost 20 years ago in 2002. It was created out of a property record industry joint task force. And it was the idea of bringing business and government partners together and to work together to identify the issues, the problems as an industry as a whole, rather than people in their individual silos. And I've joined since I've come up to Orlando, been part of PRIA in 2014, and right away got involved into a work group, and next thing you know, I'm a GIS co-chair for the government side. So it's a great organization. Everybody is at an equal level, and you develop best practices and standards for the industry. One thing I wanted to bring up is when you read and hear about PRIA's different initiatives and products, you might find, for example, they refer to recorders. We know it's a national organization, so they have, as a group, figured out, okay, let's just standardize this because there's registered deeds. It means the same thing. We have property appraisers here. There's assessors, so they try to sort of normalize the roles. So when you see recorder, don't say, well, I'm a registered deed. That's not me. So they try to standardize that. So just wanted to bring that up. Next slide. So as I said, it's a government business partnership. Typically, government side is recorders, register of deeds. Can be assessors, but it's mostly land records. We've got title folks, GIS folks, and it's a great organization. Come up with standards. It's very unique. One thing about their conferences that struck me is you go there is no real vendor hall. It's everybody is at the same footing. You can be speaking with somebody and find out that they created the company for the ERecording, and you're speaking to them as a peer. It's a peer organization, so it's really good. They're committed to promoting the integrity of the public record system. As Lindsay just talked about, that redaction really has an impact on getting the public record out there, public notice. And it actually is something I've thought about with the GIS integration too. When you create these holes, why, if you can't find a property by an address, what's the point of creating a system that allows you to do that? So in Florida, their bill is trying to put all the names back, so at least you can find documents that way. So you want to look at the efficiency of industry operations and then streamlining service delivery. That's what PRIA is committed to. The table is shared equally to discuss and debate issues. www.pria.us is their website. There's a lot of information out there. I'll talk a little bit more about the work group as we're going to go through a couple more slides. PRIA Local. There's a session coming up after us that's going to talk in detail about that, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on that at this point. And I'll pass it on to Cindy to talk about some local recording. Cindy, on mute.
The real estate market is tied to records recorded in the Register of Deeds office. Appraisers, lenders, title companies, realtors, and GIS, to name a few, all rely on the records in the Register of Deeds office to move forward with their work. Governor Evers from Wisconsin proclaimed June 7th to the 13th of 2020 Wisconsin Register of Deeds Week to celebrate the active and important role the office plays in the economy. Next slide. These numbers, although a few years old, indicate the number of records stored in our office. This past year was a busy recording year due to low interest rates, so that number has greatly increased. Next slide. I think that's Chad.
So just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm the recorder in Box Elder County, Utah. I started as a GIS guy. So GIS is really my passion, and that's how I kind of got linked with this group. So in Utah, some of the similarities that we have is we deal with property records like many of you, but some of our unique responsibilities are that we not only record the documents, but we also do in the same office, we link the property to the parcels. So we do that abstracting. We are also in charge of the ownership changes. This includes mapping the legal descriptions, the parcel splits or segs, also the combinations, and mapping used to be done by hand, as you can see in the slide here, but we've kind of moved mostly to GIS. And most of the counties in Utah, the recorders are using GIS to do their parcel mapping. Next slide. So some of the requirements that we have, because we're combined, we do most of that, is we have to have additional staff to not only record and associate those documents, but we also need the mapping staff to perform that. In my office, I have the GIS as part of the recorder's office. And so it also requires additional training because many of the people didn't know how to do some of this mapping and things like that. So we teach a lot of our people how to do GIS, just to get some of the basics, and then our GIS professionals take care of the rest of it. Some of the benefits, advantages and disadvantages to having the documents and parcels is that it's all in the same office. And so you get to work with submitters and find out some of the issues that you have and work through some of those problems. And it's nice to not have to work with multiple offices with that. Many of those issues are noticed prior to recording, so it's a lot easier to fix those if we've done them. And GIS has made a huge difference in our office, being able to more accurately draw those based on the description, find out which parcels are actually associated. If you have a right-of-way or other thing that doesn't necessarily cover a single parcel, it can cover multiples. And so that's one of the benefits. But the best benefit for the recorders in Utah is what we're going to talk about the rest of the time, which is taking all of that property records and associating them with the GIS and kind of integrating them together.
All right, I think that's me. Thanks, Chad. I know this is a pretty active organization, WLIA. I've been attending and keeping an eye on what Wisconsin's doing for many, many years. So this might be speaking well under a lot of what you understand GIS, but there are scrolling through the list, there's a lot of new people here. So I think it's valuable to talk a little bit about just what GIS is. GIS it's a system to collect, manage geographic information, which essentially means any information that has a location, and do analysis, mapping, and visualization, and share that information out. Information can be collected from the field, it can be collected from documents, it can be collected from real-time sensors or imagery and remote sensing, all types of ways to get information into a GIS. The types of analysis are unlimited, whether it's for what we're seeing a lot of now, the coronavirus, or trying to map the spread of different strains of the coronavirus, and then how to communicate that information out. I think we've all seen the Johns Hopkins GIS dashboard, which perhaps is now the most viewed map in world history. It's got over 1 trillion views. So GIS is an infrastructure of data management, data collection, and data visualization capabilities that is useful when configured to solve specific problems for whatever domain you happen to be working in. And in this one, it happens to be land records. Next slide, please. Okay. In local government, this is going to be a tricky one, Brandon, because this one's animated. Or at least it's animated on clicks. The GIS is kind of the technology platform for managing data in local government. We're talking here about clerks and recorders, where a land transaction takes place. Click. And then we pass that data along to the assessor. The assessor maps that data, finds out who the owner is to make sure they get taxed properly. And then that information gets distributed to Public Works for doing maintenance in the field, managing easements, putting their assets, the water utilities, electric utilities, those drainage utilities on top of those base maps, which helps us also facilitate for better planning. We don't want to put an industrial site where we don't have 3-phase power. We want to make sure that everything is copacetic with how we develop with understanding the restrictions, where those restrictions are, who has which restrictions. And one of my favorites is keeping everyone safe and happy. I like to have a discussion on property taxes that nobody likes them, but they're the things that make our life nice and comfortable, of course, with public safety. And the police and fire use these addresses for routing, managing crime, predicting crime. How do we best spend our resources? And then the general administration of how we manage government. How do we do this in a smart way? How do we manage our elections? Who goes to which voting place? How do we use all that information? It all begins with the parcel map, and all this information flows through. And then how do we share that information back out with the public? It used to be that we just had maps that and property cards you would go into the office. Now we have apps and maps and hubs and open data and a lot of ways to access that data with this self-service government, this new way of how government and its taxpayers and its citizens communicate with each other. So GIS enables 3 critical systems in land records: the system of record, the system of engagement, and the system of insight. The system of record, you can click that. There's a little animation on this one too, not too serious, but that's the parcel. That is the document associated with the parcel as well. So it's the deed, it's the easement, it's that document that creates the parcel or transfers the parcel. So those two are inexplicably connected together. That is the system of record. And then click, and then then we share that data out to the public. Everybody wants to know who owns what land. You know, there was a great presentation prior to this one on maybe not everybody wants to know who owns what land, but transparency is one of the fundamental canons of why our land record system works. We pay taxes. We don't like to pay taxes. Like I said, they do pay for the things that we enjoy, and we tolerate taxes because we know we're getting something back for our taxes, and we believe we're being taxed fairly and equitably with our neighbor. And that's where this transparency comes out. And now we're finding, we've known this for many years, but the value of this data for other uses, for engaging the public to solve problems that the government can't solve alone. For example, homelessness. There's not a way to do that just with the government, but the government has a lot of data that can be shared out, that can engage academia, NGOs, the private sector in new ways, and we can collaborate around this data. And then analysis. We do analysis with all of this data, and in the land records domain, this happens to be valuation. So how do we use this information that we've collected to put fair and equitable values on property and then communicate that back to the public? So why are we doing this with land records? Simply put, we want to be able to click on a map and we want to get access to all the documents that affect that property. We want a modernized index. It's not that there's different documents involved. We just want to find them easier. The common citizen, when you say grantor, grantee, their eyes are going to glaze over. But if you say click on the map and you'll get the entire chain of title, then you'll get a little bit different response. And when you do this in GIS, you have that map-based interface, but you can also have that same exact interface on a mobile device. I don't know exactly what the percentage of data that's accessed on a mobile device now, but it's well over half. I've heard 80%, I've heard 75%. I know it's mobile devices are the ultimate email deleting tools, I'll tell you that. But we use them all the time, and that's what the public continues to expect. The other reason we want to integrate GIS and land records is because we don't want to do things twice. We want to do things once, we want to do it right. We want to develop efficiency throughout our organization, and efficiencies in government cause us to cross departmental boundaries at times. So for us to achieve real efficiency in the recorder's office, we might have to do a little bit more work to provide something more to the assessor. The assessor might have to do a little bit more work to provide something back to the recorder. But those things put together add a lot of efficiency across government. So we want this universal access to systems and data from whatever your persona is. If I'm a land surveyor, I want a different set of data than if I'm a taxpayer. If I'm a realtor, I want a different set of data than if I am a civil engineer working to develop. We can have all this data normalized into a GIS system, or at least connected into a system, and that data can be then fed out into various different types of applications for use. Some call these information products, some call them apps. There's a whole wide variety of ways to share this data out. But what it does is it reduces counter traffic. It's better service from government to citizen, and it's just the modern way to do things. And I think that's you now, Brandon.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Brent, can you hear me okay?
Yep, you sound good.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. Hey, everybody, this is Brandon from ProWest. So I'm going to try to build on what Brent was just saying, and also try to set things up for what David Rooney is going to come back on and tell you about what this working committee has been doing. So David's going to tell you in a couple of minutes, once he gets on, about a white paper. We've been talking about white papers today. A white paper that was done by this group and kind of what it really found. But the key part I'm going to pull out to keep with Brent's thread about how do we do this in the GIS world. The white paper concluded that the parcel identification number, also called the parcel ID number, we'll call it PIN, is the key. So it's the key to integrating land records, like the illustration kind of explains here. And so that's how we tie our world on the GIS side of things over to the recorded documents that recorders / register of deeds use in their land records management software. So that's the unique identifier for the database people out there that pull the two together. And that's where we link the two in. So we link that to our parcels that have tax maps and address and valuation information already. That's how we link the two. So what this document was concluding then is that, that's all well and good, but to what extent are PINs required on documents when recorders record them? Because that's now going to be needed in order to make this magic happen. And so the next work product was a survey to identify the extent of the PIN requirement, to basically try to provide an answer to that question. And so 2018, the survey was conducted, and the key findings were that 20% of jurisdictions, and we're going to talk about jurisdictions here in a minute, it's basically counties, but we'll come back to that. 20% of jurisdictions do require a parcel ID number in order to record a document. However, even if it's not required, 35% of recorders will index the PIN if it is on the document. Indexing, of course, being needed in order to quickly search and query. So having it there and indexing it as well. So in a meaningful sense, we kind of say there's 55% of those documents that are those jurisdictions that do this, that have the prerequisite to set up the GIS connection. So the key point on this is this was encouraging the inclusion of PIN on recorded documents to improve GIS integration opportunities. And Dave is gonna build on this as far as the steps involved, but this is the essence of it. PIN, GIS, this is how we tie the two together. And so how can we include more? And one way to think about this is, I think it's fair to say that including PIN is something that recorders could do. Perhaps, I mean, it's easy for me to say, I don't know how much more work it is. It is some more work, but the idea would be, why bother to do it if there's no end goal in mind? Why should we bother if we don't know what we're going to take and do with that to justify the effort? So here comes GIS to say, this is why you should do that, so that we can do the sort of things that I'm gonna show you. So again, the white paper, the survey. So on the GIS side of things, for those of us that know about what the parcel fabric is, this is the kind of the connection between these two worlds even here, is that with parcel fabric, it maintains the legal document, the instrument, the record of the parcel change as a part of that. And so the legal document also ties in with PIN, historical records. So we're really connecting all these different worlds. So we're linking to the recorded documents. The record itself is associated to the changes in the parcel transactions, if you're in the parcel fabric, that is. And so I thought this would be a good helpful kind of conceptual diagram to explain how tightly these two worlds are integrated in terms of tracking changes. And then if you are in the parcel fabric and you're recording all these things, this is kind of a cool dashboard. I think it's kind of visually powerful to convey that when we're tracking those changes, here's another place to actually show each change to a parcel. As the change to a parcel is an entity, now we're visualizing that entity, that change, in a dashboard. And so we're actually going to say, show me all the changes on the left-hand side, depending on, in my upper right corner, which year I said I was interested in. Show me all those changes, and even slice those temporally along the bottom by month. And then my user in this screenshot has clicked on this particular parcel. And what it's telling him, kind of the arrows helping us here, is saying that's the parcel number, the legal record, the date recorded, the acreage. Not all parcel transactions have all of those things entered, but if they are there, it maybe even the surveyor that recorded the document, or that did the survey rather, if it's in there, it can be visualized. So a lot of powerful things happening kind of all around our topic here today. And this is a good way to think about, how do we tie land records in multiple ways, in addition to the kind of integration that we're really here to talk about. And this is kind of a new concept, so I wanted to put this out there. All right, so bear with me. I'm now going to kind of switch gears a little bit more, because of course this presentation is really also to let you know what PRIA is, and David talked about it a little bit. He's going to talk more about it here in a couple of minutes. But for the GIS crowd that we are in today, I wanted to also let you know that PRIA as an organization, as an association, is also using GIS, and specifically ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Hub, as a way to visually, powerfully communicate its own agency, its recording jurisdictions, what its members do, kind of the status of the industry. And I'm going to explain kind of how they do that. So it's a live page. We can send it out to you if you'd like to play around with it, but it's just hub. As you see here. And this is what it looks like. And I'm actually going to switch over to it live after. I'm going to advance one more slide, then I'm going to switch over to it live. And actually, there's the URL if you want to go to it. But what this is going to give you is a snapshot of the extent of recording jurisdictions and whether they are a member of PRIA or not, whether they offer e-recording or not, e-recording being kind of the cornerstone of PRIA as far as what they track, and to represent that visually, and also to give people the ability to crowdsource or provide updated information about a given jurisdiction if someone has that information, and send it to PRIA so that they can update what they're showing. So bear with me, I'm going to try to drop into my, there we go. So here I am in that very hub site. And so I happen to be in the e-recording jurisdiction coverage. Is that still coming through okay, Sandy? You're seeing the hub site? Just want to make sure. Okay. So at a first glance, as we kind of zoom out here, what this is actually telling us is the status of, let me zoom out a little bit. You're not able to see the numbers. I apologize. Okay, hopefully you can see that now. Yeah, there we go. So it's saying, oh, I'm sorry, well, the state labels are appearing right on top of it. I think you're getting the idea. It says 86 of 87, in Wisconsin, 72 of 72. Sorry, I don't know why it's doing that. What that's telling you is of all the recording jurisdictions in the state, how many of those do offer e-recording? And so here in the upper Midwest, it's nearly all. Wisconsin is all, Iowa's all of them, and Minnesota is almost all of them. And to tie into something I said earlier, in almost all cases, a recording jurisdiction is the same as a county. There's always a few exceptions, right? So, you know, New England and that sort of thing. There's some other areas where they don't map one-to-one. A recording jurisdiction isn't always a county, but certainly in this part of the world and for most of the country, a jurisdiction is a county, okay? So that's why we're able to represent this way. And then putting together this map was a little interesting for the areas where the jurisdiction is something other than the county, but that's another topic for another day. So at this zoom level, it's just giving you that overall sense. And in fact, our legend says, you know, how many of the jurisdictions is it 100% offer e-recording? And then cool thing happens is you zoom in a little bit and it changes at certain scales, and it will actually show the status of e-recording for each jurisdiction / county. And so what this is telling us is all the recording jurisdictions in Wisconsin do offer e-recording. So you see some here in Michigan do not. So you kind of see the green and the white. So what that's telling you is that, but then if you actually click on an individual recording jurisdiction and say, tell me more about this information, I click on this one, Washington County recording jurisdiction. And so this is going to give us the population, the name of the county. Is it a PRIA member or not? Does it offer e-recording or not? Does it require pins on documents? And it doesn't say anything here, but I don't know if that's the case for them or not, but it's going to give you a snapshot of that. And then the user is called to take action if they this is my county and I'm the recorder there and I want to supply PRIA updated information. So there's actually two different surveys that they are encouraged to click on or offered to click on. One would be, tell me about what e-recording systems you use. For the sake of time, I won't click on both of these, but this is simply tell me about your, do you require pins on documents? And then a couple of more specific questions about that, you know, so tell me more about your usage or your requirement of PIN or not. And again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through the entire form, but you kind of get the idea here. So are PINs required on documents? How is the PIN requirement for PINs established in your jurisdiction? Which types of documents require PINs, etc.? Okay, so it actually gets fairly fine-tuned and fairly detailed. Do you index the PINs? Are they verified, et cetera, et cetera? It's actually a 4-step process, so it's pretty elaborate. So then if someone sends this in, PRIA takes a look at this information. They may verify it with the submitter to make sure it is who they say it is. And then they can update that on the hub site that we looked at first to provide updated information to the public for anybody who is looking at it like we are right now. So there's a couple different maps. This one shows population coverage of e-recording. This is just simply look up what e-recording jurisdiction do I live in, which is pretty much always your county. So that's kind of what that would do. I'll leave it at there just again for the sake of time. But so the point is PRIA is using Hub, a technology familiar to us, to tell people about what they do and how they do it.
Can you maybe share that in the chat later, Brandon?
Sure, great idea. Yep. So once David starts talking, I'll send that along as well as the other integration I'm going to send here in just a second. So why line records and GIS integration? So Brent posed this question earlier, so we're kind of returning to that topic. And if you're following me, I guess what I would throw out there is, you know, we all know that we already bring in a litany of tax and CAMA information, right, from our various systems that we have. And we know that when we bring that into GIS, we can do a lot of very powerful visualizations of property records, or property information rather, status, sales information, value analysis with dashboards, insights, bar graphs, and so forth. And here you have a statewide parcel layer in Wisconsin. Isn't it great? So I guess the point on this would just be, remember the importance of integrating the actual land records themselves and being able to search and seek land records, because ultimately those are the land records that are the basis for what we're talking about, the records themselves, the documents themselves. So I think there's a pretty strong case to be made for the importance of bringing those together. And so without further ado, so I've been telling you a lot, we've all been kind of telling you a lot about integration, and David's going to break into the how do we do this and things to be aware of. But before he even does that, I'm going to show you an actual working example. I'm going to bring it on home for us and show you a local county. And actually Heather from Wishara County is on the call. So I made sure this was okay that I showed this with her. So I'm going to switch over again. So what does one of these actual integrations, when it's in place, what's the user experience? Okay, so what you're looking at here is specifically an ArcGIS Online solution, a tax parcel viewer, and it was set up specific for the purpose of looking up what documents are available that the Wishara County Recorder has for any given location. So let's say I have searched for an address or a parcel ID if I have that, or in this case, I just panned and zoom. I'm interested in this property right here. So I clicked on it, and so this will be look pretty familiar to most of you, but the magic really happens when you say click on, or when you click on recorded documents, and this is answering that question. Okay, I see a bunch of information about the parcel, who owns it, municipality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the kind of the magic happens when you make this leap. This is, tell me what documents are stored in the land records management system of Wishara County Recorder's office, and they use Fiddler software. And Scott is going to be speaking right after us. So this is tying right into their software, and it's actually giving you a sneak peek. So as you see here, it brings up another browser tab. And so we haven't even gone into Fiddler's own interface, their own portal, which is called Tapestry. This is already giving us a preview of what we're going to find in Tapestry, and letting us, it's giving us a sneak peek. So it's giving us what documents by document number, the document date, and the document type. So it's a certified survey map, it's a warranty date. And then if I were to click on one of these and say, yes, I do want that document, it still asks me, okay, well, you need to have an account set up in Tapestry. You still pay for the document. This is what was already in place. This is what people have been using all along. But what you've just seen is a different door into the same room, okay? Making it easier to find based on location. And how is it doing that? Because it is, I'll just keep it brief. It is asking of the Fiddler system, what documents do you have a pin, or what documents are on this pin, or you have associated with this pin? Because this is the pin we said we were interested in from our GIS map. And so it asks that question, it gets the result, it brings it up like so, and then the user says, okay, I want that document and that document, thank you very much, and they buy them just like they buy them now. So that's really it. There's a lot that goes into that, and that's what Dave is going to talk about here in a second, but this is where the rubber hits the road. This is a live site. I can also put this one in the chat. Thank you. Oop, I just closed it. There we go. I can also put this in the chat if you want to play around with it. But that is what a real GIS integration looks like. So with that, I'm going to turn things back over. David, I'm going to first go back over to our PowerPoint, and then I'm going to let you take over here.
All right, thank you, Brandon. It was a good presentation, and between you and Brent, showing that GIS is so much more than just showing documents on the map for integration. There's, with PRIA in particular, the creation of that hub, a lot of the information was available on static maps is now dynamic. So, and you can interface with that, update the information. If you see something that's not accurate, easily change. So it's just very good examples. So I appreciate that. The GIS Workgroup, they've been in place since around 2010. The early presentations of GIS, there was really not a big knowledge of what GIS was, especially on recorders. That's just not what they do, with the exception of Chad. I'm not sure how long they've been doing GIS, but it's unusual to have the recorder actually doing the GIS, it's nice to have Chad give a little presentation to show how some things are a little bit different. The group is developed to further the understanding of GIS and work towards the integration. And you know, I'm not going to go too deep on the technology. There's a lot of people been involved with this. I'm one of the co-chairs along with Brent, but where there's been a lot of help from many different people. Some of them are probably attending this conference call, and appreciate everybody's help. And in the future, if you're a member of PRIA and you're interested, jump on in. I mean, more than happy to have some new people. Next slide, please. So there's a few of the products. First one I think came out was the question and answers for recorders about land records and GIS integration. But then the first one I was involved with was a PRIA white paper for the combination 2, and this is give a background of GIS for recorders, but also give a background of recording for other industry partners, GIS professionals. And so that was adopted by the board in 2017. Next page, next slide. So the objectives of the white paper, as I said, we wanted to define the various components and just create the awareness of the benefits. And we saw the slides of the PIN. That was one of the things that came out of the white paper, was that the parcel number is probably the most common key to use to help integrate these records. I mean, you can have an address, a legal description, but on a deed or other document, most of the addresses they could be mailing address, not necessarily property address. And a legal description could be quite lengthy. So the parcel number was determined the best one. So we did not have that preconception going into the creation of this paper, but that was the end up result. And it seems to be the most common. And you saw that we did a survey just to see the extent, sort of a benchmarking where we are at that time, and be curious to see in a few years what those numbers do change. So this was not done in a vacuum. It happened to have, there was a PRIA conference, winter symposium in Savannah, just happened to have the IAAO's conference there at the same time as the assessor's office of the property appraiser around the country. We had the surveyors look at this, ERISA, the GIS organization. And so everybody took a look at the document, provide feedback, and it really increased the value. Again, working outside of your silo to get more input. Next. So this integration toolkit, it's our latest product that's out there. It's already been published, so that's good to go. We're still working on a case study portion of this, which Brandon mentioned, the survey that was being sent out. Oh no, I'm sorry, he was talking about the PIN. But there is another survey that was recently sent out to find out the level of integration. So we're looking for those that have a more advanced integration to use as a showcase. And this toolkit is like, okay, so a recorder may say, okay, that's interesting. How do I do that? Because the white paper didn't really get into that. This toolkit took some real life examples. We had a Saginaw, Michigan, that's actually going through this process. They're not required to have a parcel number, but they were able to get through town hall meetings and such and outreach to have people recognize the value of putting a parcel number on the document when they present it to the recorder. So that went a long way. So you don't have to have it legislated to make this work. And that's next. So this integration toolkit talked about the goals of integration, defined that, identified the criteria of integration, identified some challenges, and it's helping us understand the current technology. And there were six levels of integration. So how do you measure yourself? I mean, you can say, well, I've got integration. We send the records to the property appraiser, and they put that information on their parcel, and you can link back to our records directly. So that's, I just put in a nutshell what we have here in Orange County, and Miami is the same way. But that's not truly a real good integration. There's so much more that's available. So we tried to create these levels, and I'm gonna let Brent carry on from here.
All right, thanks, David. Yeah, this was actually a really useful project just to try to, it's one thing to do something and it's another thing to try to document and discuss exactly what's going on and communicate how you did it and what different things mean. Recorders are, even though they do the same thing across the country, they do it differently. They use different systems. They have different laws, state to state. And there's different interpretations of that law. So it was pretty fun to dig into that. Now, these levels of integration, there's a traditional paper process. If we all think back to the early 80s, late 70s, that's what we did. Everything was paper, and we had you know we had some kind of backup system, whether it was microfiche or whatever. And we moved quickly to an electronic copy. So I'm assuming that everyone here has uh, their deeds are electronic, and when you um, communicate with the GIS department or the assessor, we're assuming that that's done electronically, probably an attachment via email or some other kind of, maybe something a little more organized with a work management system or something like that. The next level up would be a web-based exchange. And when we say web-based, it's not necessarily just because it goes over the web, but some kind of web services where these things are accessible uh, via via a web feature service. This exchanges these. Level 3 would be all documents are electronically exchanged, whether it's a conveyance or a discussion of the conveyance, but everything becomes all electronic. Now, level 4, this is when it gets tricky. I mean, I think a lot of us are at level 2 and 3 right now, but level 4 is when all rights and restrictions are recorded and exchanged via some type of electronic medium, web services, shape files, some type of map. Now these, the rights are pretty easy. We see those in the deeds, but restriction, and easements, but restrictions are a bit trickier. Those are zoning ordinances, and sometimes those are like, for example, a restriction can be a development restriction, like a view restriction. For those of you that, I don't think Earl Epstein was from Wisconsin, but he certainly taught there for many years, who wrote uh, the Modernizing American Land Records book. He's got a great example in there about a view easement in Wisconsin, where someone has to go to every registry every year and see which properties have been conveyed that are affected by this easement. And so once we get to this level of communicating rights and restrictions, we can go across boundaries. We don't have to stay within our own jurisdiction. We can share that across jurisdiction lines within a state. Level 5 is kind of that's what we're shooting for. That's for those of you into this business, that's the multi-purpose cadastre, right? This is the 1980 report. That's kind of the holy grail, what we're going for. Where all rights and restrictions from the local, regional, state, county, and at federal level are expressed, so we can know what impacts each parcel of land. So those are the levels. They're discussed in more detail in the paper. So what makes success? And this is a bit of a generic slide, but I think it's worth commenting on how projects are successful. It takes vision, leadership, and people to be involved, all the stakeholders to be involved. And it takes a strong champion. And in this case, the recorder is often the champion. We always want to find who that champion is, but leadership many times is becoming that champion yourself. And this is an opportunity for a lot of people who would like to have a little bit of leadership experience and shepherd in some new technology. This is a good opportunity. What's the mission of your organization? How do we align that with the mission of other organizations that we want to integrate with? And what's the value? What's the business value? What's the value to your end user, your customer, the citizen? What's the value to government, the efficiencies that are created? And to do all this, we need to create a clear strategy and everyone needs to be involved here because a strategy in a vacuum is not actually a strategy. It's just a document. And we have to understand the cost. These things are not free. We need to know the IT cost, but what else comes with that with that integration? Do we increase our cybersecurity vulnerability? Do we or decrease our cybersecurity vulnerability? Do we maintain more efficiency so we don't have to add more staff in peak times? What's our vision here, and do we know what the risks are? Everybody likes to do these things fast. Those of us in this business will tell you it's going to be fast, it's easy, and it's cheap. Well, probably none of those are actually true. There's a cost. We need to develop realistic timelines, and we need to work to those schedules and develop an ongoing governance to work to those schedules. And if you don't have good people, you're probably going to fail. You got to have good people. You got to have good people in all groups. So we thought we'd close this out with talking about with some of what the trends are. Things are moving to the cloud, and if you the software as a service actually. So can you just purchase the use of some technology to get what you need done, much like your Gmail account or many other things we do? Can we just like log in and do it and have this be maintained somewhere where I don't have to maintain my servers? I mentioned mobile devices earlier. We know that everybody's using their mobile devices and they're expecting to use them more and more and more. In the 90s, if you didn't have a web page, you weren't in business. Today, if your information isn't available on a mobile device conveniently, you're not in business. And that works the same for government because the citizen expectations are evolving very, very, very fast, and they will continue to evolve. And that's one of the reasons to keep current is to align as best you can with modern citizen expectations. We're consolidating systems. We don't need nearly as many systems as in the past. The capabilities are growing. And think about some things that that we're not necessarily using, like what about artificial intelligence? Could we use, if we had all of our documents in the registry scanned, can we use OCR and then do some artificial intelligence to do a title search? We know the grantor grantee. Most deeds have a meaning and intending to convey. There's a lot of information there where we can begin to match these things up, and we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that by hand. So there's a lot of things happening. And finally, I'll close with competition because that's it may be a bit controversial, but the competition for government is the private sector. And these couple snapshots I have here, New South Wales and Landgate, which is Western Australia, they sold their registries. New South Wales sold theirs for a couple $2 billion so they could build a new soccer stadium. All right. Landgate sold theirs, and the company they sold it to is building software to go actually develop this market. So it's not a far stretch to say that, geez, I'm a new governor. I want to make a mark. Our pension fund needs a little bit of work. Maybe I'll outsource the registry component, and just have a couple field offices and centralize that to the state. Tourtelotte, Ontario is 15 million properties in their system, and it's privatized based on some service level agreements. So one of the reasons to stay current is because the more current and the more modern services you offer, the less likelihood there'll be outsiders knocking on your door. And I think that's the last slide. And with that, I think we can take some questions if we have time.
We do have a question in the chat. What about the liability you take on by interpreting certain rights, such as easements that might actually not be valid, but are of record when you add all that to the digital parcel data?
That's a really good question. I'll take that one because that's a really good question. I like that question. That's actually why we have title insurance. There was, before there was title insurance, you just got an opinion from an attorney. And attorneys are wrong. And I think it was 1859, I think the case is. I can look it up. If you're really interested in this stuff, I can send it to you. And the attorney said there was a lien on the property, but the lien wasn't any good. Attorney ended up being wrong. The client sued the attorney, goes to court, and the judge says, well, I'm sorry, attorney was wrong. I suppose you could insure this. And that's actually when title insurance came in the mid 1860s. So one thing you have to understand about the way our legal system operates and the way GIS operates, it's really an index. So the GIS is a map so you can find the source documents. The map itself generally is used for taxation. I mean, it's a tax map. So it's not a boundary map. You know, it's not a, you might put, let's put an easement on there. We'll put that easement on the map because that's where we think it is. And we'll use that for valuation. We'll use that, the Public Works Department, which I think would make which makes really good sense that the easement's there. But before you know, the term I always use is backhoe teeth in the ground. Before you put backhoe teeth in the ground, you're going to dig back into your, the original documents. You're going to hire a professional, whether that's an attorney or a surveyor, to do those interpretations for you. There's only a couple maps in our current environment that are actually legal maps. One of those is the zoning map, usually hanging on the wall, you know, in the county office or the city hall, and that's actually a legal map, and it's referred to as such in many cases. Another one is the floodplain. That's a legal map. Those boundaries are as they are shown on the map. But other than that, most maps are not actually legal documents. A boundary survey, for example, let's say you have these easements mapped out by a surveyor. That's still just the surveyor's opinion. For that to become actually to eliminate all the liability that, well, hire surveyors, by the way, that have Arizona emission insurance. So if there's liability and the surveyor is wrong, you're protected by the surveyor's liability insurance, or at least the surveyor's protected by your suit against them. The only way to really fix those rights on a map and have them be legally binding is by a judge in a court. Except for, I don't know if there's any Torrance sites in Wisconsin or not. I know there's some in Minnesota. So,
Grant, I have to agree with you. I mean, we deal with that all the time because of our unique thing where we actually abstract them. We associate those documents to parcels, whether they're valid or not. We just show them based on what the record says and then leave that up to others to determine the validity of those. But yeah, it's never been an issue. Just like you said, it's never been an issue with liability because we're just showing what the record shows.
Disclaimer, 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 right?
yeah, you always have to hit that accept button when you get it on there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so in the chat when it says there's Wisconsin's not a Torrance state, right? So it's a deed state. So those deeds need to be interpreted, you know, all interpreted and reinterpreted all the time. Keeps the attorneys in business. I'm sure there's some attorneys on there that are upset, but it's true.
Well, I think we're about out of time. So thank you all, David, Brent, Cindy, Chad, and Brandon. That was a lot of great information.